Welcome to the Liquidity Event, a show about all things personal finance with a laser focus on taxes, financial independence, and equity compensation. Hosted by AJ and Shane of Brooklyn FI, each episode will focus on a personal finance topic, some driven by news headlines and sometimes driven by listener questions. And sometimes you'll just get two money nerds rambling about what they think is interesting. Just a quick note before we get started, this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered tax or investment advice.
And welcome to the Liquidity Event. I'm your host, Shane Mason.
I'm Kody Sherland.
And this is episode 185, being recorded on April 15th. Happy Tax Day, Kody. Airing April 16th, the day after Tax Day. Email us your finance questions at liquidityevent@brooklynfi.com, and we will answer them live on the air. Kody, welcome back to the pod, buddy. How you been?
Good. April 15th is a good day. It's a lot better than April 14th.
April 14th is the actual worst day of the year, right? Because
it is. Yeah.
We don't spend April 15th filing returns. That's just a little buffer day, eh?
Yeah. We're over the finish line. Feels good.
Yeah, how do you handle the 14th? Like you're spending a lot more time than me. I just file like my friends' returns and friends and family these days, whereas you are actually in the weeds, checking boxes for clients, making sure that their Roth conversions are enacted, that we picked up their capital gains accurately, if they got married, if they had kids, making sure that all that stuff shows up on the 1040s, if they moved across state lines. Damn, I guess I can go on and on. You can tell I used to actually do this type of work. So what's the 14th look like for you and the 15th?
Yeah, it's a lot of communication with clients as we push some returns over the finish line. You know, funding solo 401ks, Roths, making sure that a lot of the nitty gritty details actually get ironed out correctly in return. Like, oh, did what did you pay for childcare this year? How many days did you spend there? Or, some of the weird little stuff. And every once in a while we run into some more wild snafus like 1099s and W-2s that are wrong, which happens way more than you think it should.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate that when you have to go to a public company and tell them that they issued a W-2 incorrectly or a 3921. That's a tough conversation to have with a client.
Yep.
And potentially extend their tax return because of something silly like that.
Yep. Yeah, it happens.
Cool. Any fun stories to share with us from tax season 2026? Of course, anonymized.
Fun stories from tax season. Yeah, I got an email this morning from someone at not a publicly traded company, but a privately owned company that did a tender offer last year, telling me that I'm wrong. And I promise you, she's not right. So that client is having their return extended.
Anything else you could share?
Yeah. These were incentive
spicy
stock options that were sold long term. They were exercised back in 2021, 2022, roughly that time period. They're definitely eligible for long-term capital gains, and they just stuck it all on a W-2 as ordinary income instead of on the 1099-B, which, funny enough, there was a 1099-B for part of the sale, which did list it as long-term capital gains. So what are we doing here?
Okay.
Yeah. No,
anyway,
we'll get it all sorted out.
That would cost the client.
1099-B gets corrected. Yeah. A lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, that would cost for every 100K of income. That's what, probably between $15,000 and $20,000 of additional tax on that amount of income. Mm-hmm. So
yep. This is several tens of
not
thousands
good.
of dollars.
And then AMT issues.
So
okay, well, I'm glad the client has you as an advisor.
Yeah. What would this client have done if he had gone to TurboTax? File for free. Not happening.
Yeah.
Sing the song.
Yeah. No, I got a Hail Mary from one of my the song. I was an advisor for Intuit when they started putting out all of these tax videos that are pretty pejorative or dismissive of accountants. I was part of like the accountant community, and they would like send us messages ahead of time, being like, how do you, before they would release it, like, how do you guys think about this? Like, well, it's not very nice. Like, okay. And then we'd see it at the Super Bowl like the next day. You're like, okay. They just wanted to get a heads up on how their PR was which was an interesting way to like look under the curtain at Intuit. But yeah, I got a Hail Mary from a friend last night who doesn't like to, he's pretty Southern pride. We don't like to ask each other for help too often, but he was like, come on, man, I need some help with this. Because you know how E-Trade does their 1099s terribly? And they like they double count a lot of stuff and exclude a lot of basis. And there was like a $50,000 shift, and his tax due became a refund because we were able to exclude the duplicates. Every year I see stuff like that happen. I'm just like, how many people with equity comp or capital gains or crypto or just any type of unusual income are double, triple paying their tax that they need to because of they went to it. The TurboTax, he even called TurboTax Live, not to shit on Intuit, but like he was talking to a TurboTax Live person, and they were like, yeah, this is accurate. You should submit this. And it was like tens of thousands of dollars of additional tax he didn't need to pay, which is so frustrating to hear about. So we're actually going to talk about Intuit today. We have 3 articles.
A lot.
We have, by the way, shout out to AJ, who's doing a digital detox this week. Very high respect for her. Thank you for sitting in for her this week, Kody. AJ's been handling some super heavy, complicated work here at BK5 for the past 4 months, so she's enjoying some time away from laptops and cell phones. So shout out to her taking a break this week. With her on break this week, we have, like I just mentioned, an Intuit article about an Intuit/AI article, which AI says is a 5 out of 5 must cover for the liquidity event because it's so relevant. Intuit has compressed months of tax code implementation into hours and built a workflow any regulated industry team can adapt about using AI to help it with deterministic calculations of tax. We have a Wall Street Journal article today about how more Americans are breaking into the upper middle class, and we'll talk about the definition of low, core, high middle class or upper middle class, and rich, which is the surprising term for people above the upper middle class. And then SpaceX article, of course, is wooing investors even as the C-suite shakeups continue from the information. We're going to revisit the article. They're flying executives down to Memphis, down to my hometown, to look at these distribution and data centers. We're going to revisit that. And then we have a pretty funny tax article about how Claude just did my taxes. Intuit is cooked, according to this Reddit poster. So let's hop right into it with our first article about Intuit from VentureBeat. Essentially, it's an article about how they've adapted both ChatGPT and Claude to handle the OBBB or the Build Back Better or OB tax law that was passed recently, and it was 900 pages long. Yeah, round one. Yeah, catch us up. I'm actually not super in touch with where the one big beautiful bill is, but at least TurboTax has been able to use some AI tools to compress a 900-page bill, which is all unstructured data and all these references to other tax law, which needs to be interpreted very quickly because Congress is often writing tax laws like towards the end of the year for the year that we're currently in, and then like it needs to be implemented very quickly, and it's not easy to update the behemoth legacy code that Intuit uses. In fact, they even wrote their own language, apparently, which was a big reveal in this article, which I didn't know about, even as a former Intuit advisor. They had their own language for writing, which is the black box at Intuit for handling tax calculations. Anyway, they were able to compress the amount of time it takes to digest all of this code using LLMs to just a few weeks instead of 6 months. So, Kody, what was your take on the article?
Yeah, I mean, this was super interesting. Back when the TCJA, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, was passed, it was like December of 2017 to go into effect in 2018. Apparently, it took Intuit months and months for people to just manually go through the bill, hundreds of pages of text, and figure out how they had to change their code to actually get it implemented through TurboTax. So if somebody clicks through the wizard and we're looking at different tax brackets, different deductions, different corporate tax rates and whatnot, I mean, it took them a long time to get it going. I mean, I remember when that happened, when I had to go through all those changes, like, okay, how is this going to actually affect how people are looking at C corps and S corps and different standard deductions, different state and local tax deductions, and all of that stuff. I mean, it was a lot to go through. And this time around, with the one big beautiful bill, a different BBB acronym, they were able to just sift it into some large language models and do it really fast. And I mean, it makes sense, right? They were able to do it with nearly 100% accuracy. They were able to do it really quickly, and they were able to get it into their proprietary, domain-specific language, which it's impressive. And when we're thinking about what direction Intuit is going to go, or how quickly we can process information, even just zooming out from Intuit altogether, these large language models are a really useful tool. Like they're pretty good. They're really fast, and I think they're really useful. It's just another chapter in AI making us better at our jobs.
Yeah, 100%. They're great at interpreting text, and they're getting better at deterministic math. We're going to talk later about somebody that uses it to prepare their taxes. I don't think it's going to be fun. We've talked about this a lot on the podcast, how it's getting better at math. We've been able to play around with Claude in Excel and PowerPoint. There was integrations and Claude Code work at the firm, and it gets better every week. It's impossible to. It's quite literally drinking from a fire hose for the past, I don't know, I would say 3 years. The first 2 years after Claude or after ChatGPT came out, it was like, okay, this is like you can write pirate songs or whatever, like songs with a pirate voice. But I'd say with Opus 4.6 and Codex, I say, since October of 2025, the usefulness of these tools is grown exponentially. I would be really surprised if Intuit wasn't using these tools to interpret a 900-page tax law and kind of like break it down and think about how things are related to each other. And of course, if they have the same amount of people interpreting these things and interpreting the laws and seeing how they could be intermingled or how some sort of weird edge case could impact, because you gotta remember, like, Congress hasn't published the forms. Congress writes the laws, and then IRS goes out, and it takes them a long time to come up with what the forms are going to look like. The new lines in the 1040, the new lines in the Schedule D, the new types of forms like the 1099 DA for crypto stuff that came out recently. And so, like, then the IRS has to put out the forms, and then Intuit gets to decide how to actually fill out those forms with their software. So they have a really tough job with a lot of time crunch. Because all of this happens on a calendar year basis, and if they're not ready, like, this $180 billion company can find themselves with their backs against the wall and end up having to make a bunch of people. Oftentimes, we don't get the forms until the middle of tax season, like March 1st. They finally figured out how to handle stuff from the prior year. So, like, not only so Intuit isn't even the end of the line; it's the accountants at the end of the line, and us as advisors, you, Kody, that have to, like, interpret the law, and then interpret the forms, and then look at what Intuit has put out via their software, and then look at the completed forms and then analyze that for their clients. Like, it's a crazy process that we handle, and we might want to thank Intuit for the hundreds of billions of dollars they've spent in lobbying over the past 50 years to keep it complex, to keep us all employed for this. But that's another topic for another podcast, isn't it, Kody?
Yeah.
Cool.
It is.
Anything else we should cover on this?
Yeah. To double down on one of those ideas, I mean, they started working on this even before these bills had actually passed. They were looking at two different sets of legislation between the House and the Senate and trying to reconcile the differences before they were actually pushing it all in. Like, they knew they had to start getting on the ball quickly. And, some of those changes were actually effective for tax year 2025, even though most of it's going in for tax year 2026. So, yeah, they were on the ball.
Yeah, I can't imagine that job. It's really tough. They probably have people sitting in DC just interpreting the paragraphs, like, as they're written, as they're updated. They're probably even writing them since they're into it, but they're probably involved in that to some degree. Cool. Well, speaking of income tax, we've got higher incomes for Americans overall. We have a Wall Street Journal article here titled "More Americans Are Breaking into the Upper Middle Class," and it's about this AEI study, which shows that the upper middle class has tripled since 1979, which seems impossible. We're talking about households earning $130,000 to $400,000 is the technical definition of upper middle class for this study. There's no objective definition of upper middle class. And buried in this piece is a tech worker pulling $180K per year with their RSUs in addition, who still talks about cutting expenses and worrying about his kids being spoiled. This is basically our client Russell in article form. It's a lot about how a lot of people are in the upper middle class, but they don't realize it. They kind of snuck in and into this definition of upper middle class. They're not really worried about rent anymore, but they are worried about sending their kids to college, which is a very expensive thing. So if they were rich, they probably wouldn't have to worry about any of these financial issues, which are people making like upwards of $500,000 per year. Also, the definition of upper middle class, Kody, I find interesting. What are we gonna, just because you made $300,000 one year, maybe you had to spend it all on your student loans. There's nothing about net worth in the article. It mentions that it's not included in the definition, which I don't love. What was your take? There's a lot to dig into here in this article. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot. There are a lot of layers here. And yes, it's completely based on income. And there are a couple different studies cited in the article. One from Pew, one from the American Enterprise Institute. It's a think tank. And they're trying to come up with different definitions because there's no solid definition of what middle class or upper middle class or rich actually is. It's, what percentage of median income are you bringing in? Like, are you bringing in double the American median household income, or how many times above the federal poverty line are you? And even simplifying it to that degree, there's still some layers here. Like, are you a 1 or a 2 person household? Are you a 3 person household? Like, a dual income, no kids household is going to see their money go farther than a single income earning household with kids, right? But it brings up a lot of interesting points just about how income is actually falling down the ladder. Broadly speaking, incomes are up. And the number of people who are earning more than double the median American income is going up. So the rich are getting richer. That is true. But what I find super interesting is the bottom quartile of income earners, especially since COVID. The percentage of people who are not in poverty has gone down. The relative levels of income of people in the bottom quartile has gone up, especially since COVID. We've actually seen that economic rising tide lift a lot of ships, which is really good news. Now, at the end of the day, we don't really care about nominal income numbers. We care about what your actual relative purchasing power is, because what good is your income going up 10% if the cost of goods and services and housing is going up 12%, right? Now, inflation has tamed a bit since COVID. We're down from 9% year over year at one point down to we're sitting around 3-ish at the moment. Latest data that came out last week was looking at roughly 3.3. So, but again, that's just your consumer price index or core CPI or the Fed uses uses a different deflator. But the cost of housing, the cost of college, and a handful of other big ticket items, that's what's really stressing people out right now. The cost of housing is way, way up compared to where it was in 2019. And even though people are feeling comfortable, the households that were bringing in, say, $90,000 5 years ago could be bringing in $125,000 now. Getting into the housing market, if you're a renter in that situation, it feels really out of reach. So, like I said, lots of layers here, but yeah, it's an interesting story. It goes slightly against the grain of maybe the vibes on Reddit that things only get worse. Because the line has gone up, which is definitely true.
Right. Yeah, I think it is more popular, or you get more attention if you catastrophize on the internet, and we are definitely in a post-social media age where negative things get more attention because it gets more engagement, and then we get more eyeballs on these things, whether it's Reddit or Instagram, so the algorithms tend to promote those things, and I hope more and more people understand that as we it's even just the local news. That's why we spend 10 times as much reporting about local crime instead of new businesses opening or positive things in the community. So yeah, I 100% agree with you that it is probably an overall, it's not all good. like the pie is growing, but more so for people in the rich category. The people in the rich category doubled their income, and the upper middle class people tripled in size. And then the middle class is getting eroded, and you're either falling down into the lower middle class, into poverty, or you're growing into the upper middle class. But yeah, the overall pie is growing. More people are working, more women are working as well. So in 1970, 11% of women had college degrees, and now 40% do. And so like the dual household income category is growing as well. But there is still the feeling that we can't afford to live. Everything, like you just said, has gotten more and more expensive. Spending $200,000 on college and having to work with an advisor to get a 529 plan set up is a thing you're going to have to do, even if you're making $400K. And also the article, as I already mentioned, doesn't discuss net worth. I would love for us to figure that out. I think that eventually we will subscribe to Thomas Piketty's recommendation that we all adopt a wealth tax, but we don't have any data on that because we've never tracked it before. So like data is going to be crucial to implementing something that is a true redistribution of wealth and an incentive for people to actually work and to lower taxes on working households and to tax wealth just as much as we tax income. Anyway, so it'd be great to have that data, but this article also doesn't discuss the differences in geography. So we have a guy in here making 180K with RSUs that feels like he can't afford to live. I tell you what, if he was living in New York City, he'd probably have roommates. They have this lovely photo of him on a cruise. He's in the upper middle class, and like this is supposed to be like a sign. Like in 1979, I guess going on a cruise was a sign that you were making it, or being on a cruise was a sign that you were making it. You could afford vacations of that nature. But this guy's like worried about making ends meet, and he should be, because 180K in New York is probably like feeling like you're making 80, 90K in Oklahoma or what have you. So got to keep that in mind as well. Like your dollar goes a lot, and that's probably why we see a lot of people move into Texas from San Francisco, frankly, because it's just too much. It's too much headwinds in terms of expenses. So yeah, this is 100% what we deal with our clients on a daily basis.
Yeah, there was a good podcast last week from Derek Thompson. It's called Plain English Through the Ringer. He's a former Atlantic writer. I was talking about like the crisis of young college grads and the difficulty of them actually trying to find jobs and whatnot. What percentage of people are still living at home. It's a good read, or listen, I should say. And it actually touches on some of these points too. Like several things can be true at the same time. The average American is better off than they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Absolutely. But at the same time, if you just look at unemployment data, unemployment surveys don't actually count people who are out of looking for a job. So if you actually look at like the raw total employment data, not the unemployment data, you'll actually see a slightly different picture. And the geography is a huge part. Like, are you living in a place that is experiencing a housing shortage because you haven't seen any building? If you're in anywhere in the Northeast or the Midwest, like if you're in Chicago, Minneapolis, New York, Boston, yeah, probably. But they're building plenty of housing in Texas. They're building plenty of housing in Colorado. So,
yeah. Well, speaking of Texas, Houston, we have an IPO. SpaceX is wooing investors as the C-suite shakeups continue is an article from The Information here. We've got to touch on the ongoing trend or the ongoing story of SpaceX heading towards their IPO, which is going to happen in as little as 2 months, looks like. Looks like they may be targeting a valuation as high as $2 trillion, even though their CFO just left and most of xAI's co-founders are gone, even though they were recently absorbed and they were losing $1 billion a month. There's a lot happening over at SpaceX ahead of this IPO. A $2 trillion valuation has been pushed back on by some of the underwriters because, look, if you ask for too much in terms of valuation, you're not going to get the appetite that you want, and then you can have a quote-unquote failed IPO. For context, $2 trillion would put SpaceX, I believe, at the number 6 biggest company in the world, like even post-IPO public companies, right? It puts it above Facebook. So the valuation multiples on that are insane. Kody, how do you feel about this article? I'm kind of skipping over the fact that they're visiting, a lot of the executives are visiting the Memphis data centers that we talked about on a prior podcast, talked about how these data centers are right next to the Little League football field that I grew up. I'm actually going to one of our employees' weddings in Memphis in a couple of weeks. I'm going to try to visit this site and see if I can get a BKFI on the wild photo of the SpaceX data center for the podcast. A little BKFI homework, liquidity event homework. How'd you feel about this article? Anything news in here that you wanted to highlight, look into? We got a lot of clients at BKFI that are going to participate in this IPO.
Yeah. The first thing I thought was, oh, wow, Elon's having more falling out with people. Where have I heard that one before?
No way.
Yeah. I mean, going into this IPO, though, there are a lot of things that we don't know. Like, the paperwork that they filed with the SEC, there's a lot of private information in there that we don't have our hands on. We don't actually know what they're worth. We don't actually know what their revenue looks like. We don't actually know how much income they're actually generating, what their profit margins look like. We don't know, especially because this is several businesses piled into one, essentially at this point. Scrolling on Twitter in space, basically. Elon won't like that I use Twitter instead of X, but. Yeah, I mean, with the IPO coming, they're going to start making their pitches to institutional investors to try to figure out what they're worth. Are they going to go in at 1.7 trillion? Are they going to push for 2? Are they actually going to land at like 1.4, 1.5? I don't know. But frankly, I don't think really anybody knows where it's going to end up at this point. So when they do actually IPO, probably this summer it looks like, that stock is going to be super volatile. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't actually know what's going to happen. It would not surprise me today if I'm just going to come up with a random price here. Let's say it's $100 a share. It wouldn't surprise me if it goes up to $200 the day that it opens up, and then it ends up at $55 a week later, and then it just whipsaws all over the place because people on the internet are rabid about trying to get into the position. Then they're like, "Oh no, what are we going to do here?" And there's a lot of vibes of people are going to jockey around there, and as a financial planner, I'm not super keen on the idea of telling anybody, yeah, let's go buy this. And if you're going into that IPO with a bunch of currently private stock, you're going to need a plan to understand how you're probably going to try to diversify out of that position. Or how much are you going to try to sell? When are you going to try to sell it? What are you going to do with the proceeds? How are you going to diversify that? How are you going to think about taxes? All that stuff.
Volatility 100%. I mean, they merged a rocket company with an AI company that was losing $1 billion a month, and then fired all the leadership team, and now they walk up to Wall Street and ask for $2 trillion. This is a pretty ambitious pitch. I mean, it's very, very crazy. I mean, this is, if the public, I can't wait to get the public S1. We should have you back on for when that releases. Supposedly coming in early May, so a couple of weeks from now, with the listing targeting June. I can't wait to get your take, maybe a Galloway take on this. I mean, if they're projecting $20 billion of 2026 revenue, which is what's been reported elsewhere, if they're raising at $1.7 trillion, that would be 87 times revenue. And I don't think they can probably get an EBITDA multiple because the EBITDA is probably negative, but I'm not sure. We'll see that when we get the S1, which would be wild. Now there are no competitors, right now. So the idea here is that Amazon's space shipping company and any other space shipping companies won't be able to compete, and they'll be able to stay ahead, and that, I guess, would justify the valuation. Also, it's an Elon company, so they have been historically traded at ridiculous margins or ridiculous multiples. Speaking of valuations, just a little valuation history for everybody. $10 billion valuation 2015. Wow, what a time, 2015. Where were you in 2015, Kody?
I was a senior in college.
Yes, let's go. $74 billion in 2021. So that's a 7x return in 6 years. Incredible. $180 billion in 2023. Just 2 years later, they've doubled to 2.5. $350 billion in late 2025. And here's the biggest jump. Late 2025, $350 billion. Now $1.75 trillion. About 8 months later. And that is let me do some quick math, a 7x in about 8 months. So I'm not sure what happened in terms of SpaceX, I guess the mergers with XAI. I'm not sure if the Starship, I believe, has crashed multiple times. I don't know. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of SpaceX, and I do have high hopes for it, for our clients as well. It's going to change a lot of lives, make a lot of millionaires and decamillionaires, and for early employees, perhaps billionaires. But 87 times revenue is nuts. There's no other company that trades at that multiple. So we will watch it closely, and we will be continuing to cover it on the podcast. Okay, before we go today, we have to get to this Reddit question. This is an incredible question. It's tax season relevant. Claude just did my taxes. Intuit is cooked, from Redditor SQL Genius. TLDR, I used Claude Code to do my 2024. And wait, I missed that before. Why was he also doing 2024? He's a year late on his taxes, which is perfect for this poster. But he also did his 2025 federal and state taxes, and it worked, so to speak. It cost $0 and took 0 clicks through their stupid wizard. I'm shorting. This is on Wall Street Bets, by the way. I'm shorting Intuit $100K, which, by the way, Intuit's already down 50% since Opus was released in October, which is an irrelevant time milestone. But it's down a lot on AI fears. I've actually met with the CEO of Intuit when I was there, and he straight up said Intuit's taking AI is going to wipe out tons of jobs. He told me point blank. It was very candid. And then he popped on a private jet and flew to Texas. It was pretty baller. It is a $180 billion company, but I mean, AI is a real threat that he's taking very seriously, and it's being reflected in their stock. This was in April of last year, by the way. So, yeah, he saw this coming down the pipeline. Kody, would you prepare your taxes with Claude Code or with ChatGPT?
Oh man, this is so funny. Would I do it? I could probably make it work, but I don't really feel like putting in the effort to actually get it to do that. But honestly, the TurboTax wizard is fine. I kind of want to sing the song again. The karaoke. Only 37% of filers qualify for the free edition. Anyway, yeah. Oh man, this Redditor has set himself up to get roasted in 18 different ways on this post. Like, he said, okay, Claude did my taxes. Sure, that's not surprising. I can see how I could do a basic 1040, right? And then he said, now I'm short 100K on Intuit, after saying the title says Intuit is cooked. Now, the funniest thing in this post, there are a couple, was like maybe 2 sentences later, he said that Claude asked him if he has finally upgraded from single filing status. Nope. And then it said, it even carried over the massive losses that I've accrued listening to this sub for the last 5 years. So
that was pretty funny.
It's really an indictment on Wall Street Bets. But yeah, and then somebody commented saying, hey, can I get Claude to trade for me so I won't have losses? It'll probably tell me VOO and chill. It's probably right. But yeah, I mean, once again, as a financial planner here, I'm not going to get super into the weeds on the ins and outs of whether Intuit is properly valued or not, or even honestly like defending their business at all. It's not really my place to say. It's super easy to get into the rabbit hole of whether a single specific company stock is overvalued or undervalued. And it's very important to remember that the market can remain insolvent longer than you can remain solvent. Or it can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. And the market has excellent access to information. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows that AI is making things quicker, more efficient, and, in the case of Intuit, taking over some of what they do. So, the market has that information, and it seems to be priced in. So this guy's shorting it $100,000 again. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. And if you have Intuit stock, or you work at another publicly traded company and you're worried about a parallel situation that is directionally making you fearful in the same way, maybe book a discovery call at brooklynify.com and talk to a planner and think about how you want to get diversified. and maybe don't risk your financial well-being shorting a position $100,000.
Absolutely. Nightmare scenario to get audited because you relied on a probabilistic tool instead of a deterministic one. Let's not do that, everybody. I love Wall Street Bets. It is unfortunately not a joke for some readers. So I hope that, the guy posted his actual position in the article or in the Reddit post, and he's actually up. He's up 12%. Over how many days? I don't know. Anyway, day trading is we can't be looking at short-term results for long-term outcomes. So cool. All right. Yeah. Don't do your taxes on Claude Code, everybody. There are some other, if you do want to look at getting your taxes done, there are some actual, oh, never mind. I'm going to not point people in that direction. Well, I'll let them release themselves over 2026. All that to say, Kody, I do think that there will be some great tools for 2027's tax season. Totally. There's a lot of startups that I see in the space, like Basis is one of them. Intuit, of course, they have more data than any other company when it comes to personal taxes. So I'm sure that if they deploy their AI models correctly and they make the right hires, then they're going to have solutions themselves, proprietary solutions that are not going to be an adaptation of foundational models for tax purposes, but they'll just be tax-purposed models. And then there's a lot of small startups that are doing a great job of getting actual tax returns submitted. By the way, this person had to paper file their return because you need to get approved by the IRS to electronically file, and Claude is not approved. So big difference. Paper filing your return is a nightmare in and of itself. So, all right, I think that calls it for this week's episode of the Liquidity Event. Thank you so much for listening. Please email us your financial problems at liquidityevent@brooklynify.com. And finally, you Stans can leave us a review if you want to be weird about it. Thanks, Kody. Thanks for having you, bud.
Peace, guys.